and welcome to the fifth edition of the webinar organized by MRO Business Today. We are now slowly entering into a post-COVID-19 pandemic phase. Domestic flights are operational in almost every country, while aviation industry is slowly gearing to open up the international borders. Once the international borders are open, let's hope that there will be smooth sailing ahead. In today's webinar, we'll be discussing about the current status of COVID-19. How is it affecting the MRO businesses right now? How will the operators recover? In current times, what should be the survival strategy for smaller MROs and third-party MRO services? Apart from this, we'll also pinpoint about the mounting stress levels in the industry due to closing of MRO shops, workforce furloughs, layoffs, etc. And to discuss all of this, we have with us our esteemed speakers, Mr. Ravi Menon, who's the Executive Director of Airworks. Hello, Ravi sir. Welcome to the webinar. So you need to unmute.
Thank you, Swati. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. We have with us Patrick Cruz, who's the Senior Vice President, Sales and Business Development at Jet Midwest. Hello, Patrick. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for the invitation.
And we have with us Andrew Ramsey, who's the President of Volo Aero MRO. Hi, Andrew.
Well, good evening to you and good morning to the US participants. It's a pleasure to be here.
And we have with us Chuck Adams, who's the Managing Partner of Corpus Consulting Group. Hello, Chuck.
Hi, thank you for having me, and it's a humble pleasure to be here. Thank you.
A warm welcome to all of my speakers. Before we start with the webinar, I'll very quickly run through with a few ground rules for the participants who are coming here for the first time. Only the speakers will be visible and audible to all the registered participants at all the times. The participants are requested to post their questions in the Q&A tab which is given below. Kindly mention your name and the name of your company when you post the questions. Also, if you can, please specify the name of the speaker to whom your question is addressed. We'll try and answer as many of your questions as possible during the course of this discussion. A warm welcome to all of the registered participants. Today, the stage is set for an unsteady recovery. September onwards, many of the airlines will adjust their flight schedules based on customer demands. Aviation recovery will not only need business travelers with corporate clearance to travel, but they'll also need to boost passenger confidence in air travel. But when will that happen is still very unclear given the current international travel restrictions. On this note, I throw open the floor for discussion. My first question is, the MRO industry is one of the worst affected industries, we all agree, in this COVID-19 pandemic, and it has had a massive impact on the MRO sector. Now, many MRO providers have started to furlough, lay off, or short-time the workers. Full impact of the crisis is yet to be felt, and many of the analysts have predicted that the next coming year will be like a complete disaster. I would like to know all of your views, starting with Ravi sir.
Thank you, Swati. Yes, these are difficult times, and while we have the various pharma companies searching for solutions in the form of vaccines, I think the MRO industry too is working very closely with the environment to try and find a solution to mitigate the kind of impact that the COVID has on the environment, on the airlines, and in turn the MROs. Well, the challenges that an MRO has pre-COVID or post-COVID largely remain the same. And that is in terms of, the margins are wafer thin to begin with. So whatever work is done, you have to ensure that you do it right, you get it right the first time, and most importantly, to ensure that the payments that are received in a timely fashion. So one of the big problems or challenges that the MRO faces is liquidity. The business, it's a question of deciding, what to take on at a time like this, whether one takes on the smaller C checks, where, the payments are, received very quickly, in terms of if you do a C check or things in a week or 2 weeks, you have your payments. But if you take on a lease return or, recoveries, those are long term. So the point here is essentially, one has to have the ability to adapt quickly to the situation and also, take necessary steps and embark on initiatives to mitigate the kind of risk that the COVID has thrown up. Fortunately for us as an organization, we haven't laid off anybody. We as an MRO are diversified in the sense that we have a business aviation MRO too, and that is more of an annuity. So there is a steady, flow of income. We do aircraft paintings, we do interiors, so the opportunities are there for us to somehow collectively work together as a family. And that, I mean by all the stakeholders in Airworks. And we've been able to continue that way. The other important point is to keep the morale of the staff, always buoyant so that they feel motivated enough and committed enough to weather any storm along with the organization. So we don't see, a return back to, the pre-COVID normal. That will take a long, long time. And so the question is the ability to weather the storm as an organization. Yes. The other challenge is working capital, because liquidity is one of the biggest challenges that one has. And there are no financial institutions, coming forward to, provide an MRO funding, in terms of operational cash. And, that is for us a big challenge, but we're working through that.
All right. Thank you, Ravi sir. Andrew, your take on this, since you're the liquidity expert.
Liquidity expert. Okay. Well, thank you very much for, as I said, the invite to participate in this. Just to give you the brief background for everybody who doesn't know us, we're an MRO facility based in the US that caters to the US military as well as the civil markets. We've been in operation since the 1960s. So we've been here a while. We've seen peaks and troughs. This is obviously one of the most severe troughs for the aerospace industry that I've been involved with. And I've been in the industry for about 25 years. So we've experienced September 11th, we've experienced SARS, MERS, we've seen those kind of impacts. On the MRO side, we generally, for these type of things, go in to the downturn a little bit later than the manufacturers do, but also come out later than the manufacturers do because of the slower uptake of airline activity. So for us, what we know is going to happen is that the airlines are slowly but surely going to bring back capacity. We see it now that the numbers of airlines and the seats that are being offered are slowly but surely increasing. But that's really not a fair reflection of activity, I don't believe. The airlines are bringing more planes back online. They're not operating anywhere close to where they were frequency-wise and utilization-wise. But obviously operating aircraft and fleets at a lower utilization level means you don't have to store them, and the costs of bringing them in and out of storage as well. But as they only operate approximately 50% of the fleet, short haul anyway, they have all the spares for the 100% of those aircraft. So the airlines, even though they're operating 50%, are going to basically, if they can, burn through the spares and the green time of what's available in their inventory before those parts start to slow down, well, come back out for MRO activities. So in the MRO space, you're going to see this delay of, the airlines will pick up, the passenger numbers are going to pick up, but the input into the MROs is going to lag that. So unfortunately, this time we didn't really get much of a lag going into it. Everybody got hit at the same time. So we saw orders just dry up. On our civil side, significantly. We saw work just drop. We in the US have been quite fortunate in that we had a PPP loan application process that gave liquidity to employers if you could get hold of it. We were fortunate in the fact that we managed to get hold of that quite quickly. That has definitely been able to soften the blow whilst we figure out, okay, how are we going to address this and how are we going to pivot to continue the business. On that side of it, we've managed to avoid doing layoffs. We made a corporate decision not to do that, to keep hold of the expertise and the valuable contribution of our team, but with clarity and communication to the team members to say, this is what's going on. When do we see it coming back? That's the crystal ball. I think everybody's looking for that answer. I'd be really surprised if anybody's actually got it. But if they do have it, they've probably got next week's lottery numbers as well. What we see is narrow body is going to come back quicker than wide body. It's going to still take time. So I would expect numbers to start returning to normality. It's going to be, I think, next year before we really see that. For us, we have the military work, so that's definitely been able to cushion the blow. Similar kind of situation as Ravi mentioned. If you are singularly focused on the civil passenger market, you have significant headwinds to deal with, not just now, but in the coming 12 months. So organizations really need to understand what markets they serve, what markets they can serve, and to pivot to basically continue the generation of revenue from people who can pay. The only other item I would mention on this is, I think the savior is the cargo market. The cargo operators are flying strongly, but bear in mind, give or take, the cargo fleet is, say, 2,000 aircraft, whereas the passenger fleet is 20,000+ aircraft. So we can't all hang our hats on serving the cargo market to get us through this situation.
But I feel that cargo has like the this COVID pandemic, right? Since the pandemic started, cargo flights have been increasing, and you see a lot of passenger to freighter conversions are coming up. So I think the cargo market is really coming up. Maybe in future it would be the next in thing. What do you feel?
There's definitely a short-term demand, and passenger aircraft are being converted to carry more cargo. But I think that's predominantly, and my guess is as good as the next person's. I think that's partly to deal with the PPE issues that we're seeing on a global market at the moment. But as the supply chains get used to that, people, I believe, will revert back to shipping. It's not as, I need 50 million masks and I need them because I'm running out next week. We know what the demands are a little bit better now, and I think people are getting over that immediate need, immediate delivery hump. And they're going to be able to ship back some of that demand that's happening now back to shipping and trucks, etc. But yeah, we all know passenger planes provide a lot of cargo capacity in the belly hold. But realistically, taking out seats, operating 777s or 737s or A320s with cargo on seats, it's a short-term fix, but it's not really that profitable.
All right, Patrick, your view on this?
Well, again, thank you for the invitation. And, I would say Jet Midwest as an organization has a fairly diverse products that we're offering to the marketplace, not just with service, but with assets. The core of our business is really buying aftermarket assets, selling the complete aircraft and engines that are serviceable, tear down the balance, and then manage those through the repair. And we happen to be lucky enough to have a large facility with storage and parking. We do have an MRO on site, both component as well as some airframe services that we provide. So we touch a lot of different pieces of the marketplace. We're also strategically positioned in the freight market. So a lot of the freighter companies really have been our key customers, which, as Andrew pointed out, that's been pretty important for us in terms of survivability. I'd also say Andrew made a good point. People are having to move into do things a little bit differently and find those newer places to create revenue. And I know we started that about 100+ days ago really saying we need to maybe target the market differently. We know these aircraft are going to be put into storage. So we started to really pay attention to supporting that aftermarket piece. It is a little bit lumpy, and what we're seeing is the initial flow of aircraft from the North American operators was just looking for a piece of concrete that they could put their airplanes on in the short term. Many of those aircraft have gone back to service, and now we're going to start to see the waves of leasing companies who are getting aircraft returned because the airlines simply can't pay. We'll probably see leasing companies who will struggle to place those aircraft, and that's going to really start to see the aftermarket for airframes and engines start to be impacted in terms of how much supply is out there. I think the A320 is probably a good example where there will be quite a few A320s that are aging that just needed to come down anyway due to how old the aircraft were. So those things are going to be accelerated. And again, that's a place in the market where we already are positioned, and we've elevated our position in that marketplace because we see there's going to be a lot of work there in the next couple of years. And certainly, I think as the leasing companies struggle because they're not getting paid, you're going to have the same result with banks who need support from the MROs, whether that's sending the airplane off to Ravi to have him do interior conversions and paint to change delivery from one operator to the next, or it's a dismantle service with engine storage. I'm sure Chuck will be able to talk more on the engine aftermarket impact with all of these spare engines that are going to hit the marketplace, because I know that's where some of his expertise lies. I'd also like to point out, Andrew made a great point about what are the airlines doing on the spares side for the component level MRO and the spares. So when we watched the post 9/11 world, the aircraft went back into service very quickly, but there was an economic downturn that was driven by consumer spending. When we hit the 2008, 9, 10 bubble in aviation, we saw a different behavior, and that behavior was really from the operator to say, our costs are very high because of fuel. We really want to have the aftermarket carry the cost of the components. So instead of the operator having a $150,000 IDG on their shelf waiting for the next failure, they relied on their repair vendors and their parts suppliers to say, why don't you hold that on your shelf and we'll make a commitment to you to purchase that when we need it. And we saw them burn through their inventories and then not replenish. They went to minimum survivable levels on inventory. Now, in the last handful of years, as the fuel prices have maintained low fuel prices, I think the revenues have been fairly strong in North American passengers. Their cash became better, and they decided to invest more in those components and start building their stores. So I think now we're going to see, just as Andrew pointed out, they're going to be burning through those and not reinvesting capital into them until they reach those minimum thresholds that they discovered in 2010. One of the other strategies I think that I know our company is employing, there's a lot of really talented people in the business, and a lot of people are going to be put onto the sidelines because of COVID. And we really believe this is the time to take some really talented people and put them in positions within our organization, help us grow these new facets that we are developing, and really help grow those pieces. And with the remote conference that we're doing right now and a lot of the changes that we're all having to make in the way business works, we certainly see that strategy as a boost for both the ability to serve our customers as well as the ability for us as an organization to grow. We're actually looking at this as an opportunity to grow, bring in additional assets and servicers, and then grow our organization both with human capital as well as asset value.
Yeah, that's all it's about, turning adversity into an opportunity, best. Chuck, your views on this?
Sure. And thank you again for having me. Yeah, I mean, I really liked how Ravi and Andrew really touched on the liquidity point. COVID's having a big impact across the chain, and we definitely see that lag a little bit in the MRO now. And now it's really starting to hit hard, and it's going to hit hard for a while. Liquidity is definitely a big concern, coming from the engine MRO side. particularly, we've noticed as well that a lot of the OEM-based MROs is what I've seen is been hit really hard. And I think that has a lot to do with how they go about doing engine MRO. You know, you look at a lot of the power by the hour kind of programs, and at least from a maintenance standpoint. And if you're reliant on, you know, airlines flying to be able to collect that revenue because they charge by a cycle or an hour, well, that creates a problem for those that are trying to rely on that revenue to get that cash flow that so they can keep pushing their engines that are currently in the shop out the window. And so it definitely creates a liquidity problem for sure. Also, I think Andrew touched on it very well. You know, being diversified is going to be a very good thing that you're going to want to do as best as possible. And I think it's funny he mentioned, you know, U.S. military. Yes, a lot of the military work that I've seen in a lot of the shops is still ongoing. I think one of the biggest things that they're battling right now on really is just the day-to-day. It's the COVID stuff. You know, I was just on the phone not too long ago with a component repair shop, and they had to shut down the whole shop because of a COVID issue. And so even though they were working on military work, right, it ended up obviously causing a lot of issues in the shop. And so not only have we seen slowdowns, obviously in the commercial side, but even the military, there is some rumblings of that as well that can affect the whole chain additionally. You know, looking at the whole picture of the whole aviation industry, you know, you see a lot of production right now being cut. You know, I have a lot of people that I know over at Boeing that have been cut or suffering over there. So there's that production side. And then down the road, it's just flowing down into the MRO. So hopefully over the next year or two, we'll start coming out of it, but it'll be a few years, yeah, before we really see any big, I guess, pre-COVID levels of activity. So
That's true. So we can say that currently cargo and military are the support system of majority of the MROs. Actually, my next question is also coming from one of our audience called Neeraj Shankar. He's a graduate of aircraft maintenance engineering from UK. And even I was going to ask this question, like majority of wide body aircrafts are parked in deserts or they are in storage facilities, and airlines are just, you know, readjusting their fleet plan to preserve liquidity. Many airlines have already announced early retirement of their wide body fleets like 747 and 380s. So my question was, do we see an end of wide body era, or is there a scope for comeback? And how is the MRO industry responding to this change? Yeah, who would like to go? Yeah, Ravi sir, please.
I think all four of us may have a comment, you know, or things.
Yes.
You know, fortunately, the language of aviation, wherever spoken, is the same, you know. So the thing is, for the airlines to come back, first and foremost, I think it is important to bridge the trust deficit, you know, in terms of the fear factor that COVID has created and how vulnerable we can be. So it's going to take time before a narrow body can be filled, you know, or the seats, or have it to its break-even capacity. So the wide bodies, you know, I mean, I can't really predict it, but I would think that that would take much longer. We've had airlines like Emirates, you know, who have, you know, kind of parked 46 A380s, and they're not going to be operating them. They've laid off several of their crew members too. For it to come back to normal, that is something we cannot predict, but definitely the narrow bodies will get back. I think the airlines will be reinventing the way they position their aircraft as operators and the kind of business that they do. And importantly, I think, you know, we spoke about cargo, we may have combi aircraft, you know, to be passenger and cargo, to kind of optimize the revenue stream, you know, that's flowing into the airline. But no predictions over there. You know, at the moment, I think the passenger capacity is still 26% of what it was pre-COVID time. There's another 74% that has to play catch up, you know, for the aircraft to really have their optimal load factor to become economically viable.
So what do you feel this combi aircraft concept that you gave, like it's a very interesting concept. So So
Well,
do you see a wide body aircraft being a combi aircraft with passenger and cargo?
there is a history of that in the past. There is a history of that. I don't know what the logistic issues would, be involved, or rather not go in or delve deep into that. But the fact or the example of the combi is a matter of, reinventing the way one will do business, because you have to ensure the survival today. Those who survive today have a tomorrow. So it is important, that you pull together, see how best, you could try different permutations and combinations. It could be 40% passengers and 60% cargo, or it could be the 40% cargo, 60%. It's just wide open. These are just thoughts.
Yeah, that's true. It's either innovate or die. What do you say, Patrick?
Yes, if you have to have it tomorrow, you better survive today.
Well, in terms of wide body traffic, I think that there certainly is going to need to be a consumer behavioral change, and that will drive the work. And Robbie's correct that the domestic work will return first. Certainly these hub and spoke systems that these airlines have developed, especially the major carriers, you have to get people flying domestically to go to Atlanta in order to get on a flight to fly from Atlanta to London Heathrow. And so there will be a lag for wide body work to come. But I certainly would say that the more attractive 2-engine wide body aircraft will be the ones that will survive, whether that's 777, A330, 767, that will all depend. And certainly the more attractive freighter conversion aircraft, which will become the favored secondary life of the airplanes, will also impact what's happening. I don't think that A380 cargo conversions are going to be a direction people will go. I think they'd much rather simply say there's already a 777 in the works, and those things are already happening. So I think that's where you're going to see a lot of the wide bodies. They'll come back online again. It'll be lagging, but that international travel will return. We also have to remember that a lot of travel for certain operations is targeted to things like vacations. And again, the comfort level of the consumer saying, yes, I'm comfortable getting on an airplane and flying 2 hours because there's not a convenient way to get to a beach community from where I live. So those vacation travels, once those start to ramp up domestically, we'll start to see those people that have same comfort levels will start to open up internationally. And I certainly think that the ability to mitigate things like social distancing, which is certainly the buzzword here in the States, the social distancing in a wide body aircraft is certainly a lot more convenient. And with fuel prices being very low, it is interesting. Robbie talked about how do you capitalize now? How do you create that now? And I'll be intrigued to see how these North American operators can potentially use their wide body aircraft to create maybe a more comfortable situation for social distancing. Could they operate wide body aircraft on shorter domestic routes because they've created that, especially with fuel prices being low? Again, there's engine costs and airframe maintenance costs that have to be factored in, but it's certainly a creative idea that I'd be intrigued to see if any operators really take a hold of.
Of course. So gaining customer confidence. It's all about gaining the customer's confidence for air travel going ahead. What do you think, Andrew? Your views?
I think for the confidence side of it, you've got obviously wearing masks, social distancing. I think there's two factors here that are really going to swing travel back into a positive, strong growth kind of market. Personally, I think that's going to be a vaccine, which is then going to give people the confidence to say, okay, I can get on a plane. I'm not going to be susceptible to being infected. Airlines, in the short term, yes, you can not sell the middle seat. You can reduce your capacity to 60%, but realistically, you don't make money at that. And Ryanair and EasyJet in Europe are definitely not going down that road. Southwest over here, which is the equivalent, is blocking that middle seat because they can do that at the moment because the demand isn't sufficient for them to sell all the seats. The second part of this is that for long haul, let's cut to the chase here. It's 20% of that airplane pay for the flight, and that's premium. So that's business travel predominantly, getting on that plane, sitting in first class, sitting in business class. You can make money as an airline if you fly with that 20% at the front full and the 80% at the back empty. You can't make money with the 80% at the back full and the 20% paying the money empty. It doesn't work that way. So you've got to have the business environment saying, yes, it's safe to travel, it's safe to get out and visit my customers, it's safe to do all of this. Now, I think personally, it's going to be a vaccine before we get to that stage. Some people are going to travel, but the vast majority are going to turn around and go, you know what, I don't feel comfortable. My family doesn't feel comfortable with me getting on this airplane, so I'm not going to. I'm going to Zoom call it. It's not as good. You're right, you can't take somebody for dinner on a Zoom call. You cannot build a long-term deep relationship. You can maintain it with Zoom and these video conferences, but it's not the same. So until you've got that guarantee of safety type approach, and that's also going to be that testing at the airport within 20 minutes. So, okay, I'm queuing up, I'm dropping my bag off, I'm getting my ticket, I'm getting my test, and before I get on that airplane, I know I'm negative. And getting off the airplane and queuing up to go through customs and immigration, having that test and getting into that country and them saying, yeah, we confirm you're negative, go and have your meeting. I think those steps need to be in place before really we're going to have a concerted recovery from this. That's my view.
What all these steps that you mentioned, don't you think there's a building level of frustration with the passengers? Like right from a person enters an airport to the time he boards an aircraft, there is a list of steps that he has to follow, and it does not just include covering your mouth with a face mask and social distancing. You have to go through one test, with another test, then there is this, that, and it's really frustrating for people. So is there a shortcut to it? There has to be.
We had that frustration, for example, and Patrick probably has more experience with this than me, but when September 11th hit, the step change in security that happened in the United States, it hit passenger confidence, it hit passenger numbers, and it took a while for people to accept that.
This is different. No.
It is, but it's that shock and that change to the traveling public. And it's that feeling of safety.
Right. Chuck, your views.
Yeah, they hit the nail on the head there. It goes back to passenger confidence, right? I found it very interesting. I was reading a little report from REI, who's a US-based recreational chain, and they're saying they're selling out a lot of the local recreational goods and services. And so we do see a lot of people I think it's kind of a symptom of people kind of hunkering down and waiting to build that trust with flying again. We definitely see a big recovery right away, hopefully in the nearer term in the narrow body as people fly, interstate, at least for the United States with how big we are, and those kind of services. But once you go wide body and you start going across, at least from US and going somewhere else, now you have to deal with, as Andrew's mentioning, the regulatory issues around, do you take that test? What about the vaccines? And our country is going to be even allowing other citizens from other places to be able to go to those other countries. We are starting to slowly see those narrow body hops where we're seeing kind of Europe and parts of Asia starting to open up. But I was looking, just recently at some of the restrictions, and I'm noticing that the US trying to go to other places is actually quite difficult right now. So until we get that confidence, until we get those, whether it's the testing or the vaccines and that system in place, that'll be the first step. But then the second step is over time, getting used to it and just dealing with it at some point, right? To be able to bring that wide body market back. So it'll get there, but it'll take some time to build that trust again, for sure. Yeah.
Apart from passenger inconvenience, even while working at our workspaces, when you work in an MRO, like for example, repairing a landing gear or something like that, there are various compulsion safety norms which are to be put in place, like social distancing. So has it created inconvenience for these MRO operations while performing regular checks? And when you were in G, like what was your experience there? How did you challenge?
Yeah. So, and it not only was just at the MROs, it flooded all the way up even to the office. So obviously there's the major measures that are out there. You know, you have things such as the mask, the social distancing. Another common thing that's done is shift on, shift off. You know, or a certain group of people will come in, you know, for a week, right? And then that group will leave, and then the next, you know, they'll sanitize the whole place down, and then the next people will come in. So that way, there might be some contact, not necessarily that you're always going to be able to stay 6 feet away from each other or a couple meters, right? But at least you kind of pair those people together so that if there is some kind of outbreak of COVID, you'll at least be able to isolate that group, disinfect, and at least try to keep things running. Are things running at full capacity? Not really, no. Obviously with the reduced demand, but not being able to get everybody into the shop all at once can obviously slow things down. And I'm curious to hear what the others have been doing at their shops. But that's
So
kind of
am
what
I.
they've been doing. So, yeah.
So am I. I'm very curious as to how Airworks is dealing with this crisis.
All right, so let me put it this way, Swati. One is the environment that we work in terms of the ambient temperature is very high in India as compared to most anywhere in the world. So it is a challenge, you know, for people to be wearing the protection gear and, you know, the gloves and all the other necessary paraphernalia and then function efficiently. So that is a challenge. But having said that, nature has its own ways, you know, to somehow equalize everything. So the quantum of business that we're doing is vastly reduced. The people are not in a hurry to, you know, ensure that specific turnaround times are being met. So I would say that, you know, we have to weather this. People embrace change. It takes a little time before they will embrace the change, like grow out of, you know, the way things were to the way things are going to be while going into the future. And the sooner we as an organization and our people, we adapt to it, it's a no-go situation otherwise. So there's no option here. One has to find ways of efficiently functioning within the limitations of the environment. It's hot, you're sweaty, you need to take more frequent breaks, but we're not working towards deadlines as yet. But when it does pick up, maybe by then the entire environment would have changed.
It's true. Working to the best of our abilities.
Yes. I think, you know, one has to embrace the change. There's nothing like a new normal. It's going to be the new way that we're going to be doing things. Normal was pre-COVID, which we termed as normal. Going 10 years hence, this is going to be the new normal, or, you know, the normal, so to speak.
Absolutely. How do you think, how is Jet Midwest coping with this social distancing and working at the same time?
Well, I would certainly say I have a massive advantage in that our facility is significantly larger than we actually need to accomplish the task. So moving and creating space in a place as large as ours has been very convenient. For the operational team in the component shop, a lot of the work that they're doing already, working on the cells, sanding, painting, composite repairs. So using masks and gloves already is a common practice with the normal course of their day. So it was very easy for them to adapt. Additionally, as Chuck discussed, we did key critical roles. We split our teams in half and they worked separate non-overlapping shifts so that we would not cross-expose. As we got past the first 90 days or so of these practices, and again, we were fully masked and gloved everywhere we went. So once we got about 90 days into it, we found other ways to mitigate those things. Also because the slowdown, there was less product to ship and less for repair, so that, which is not our happiest point, but we did actually try and preserve those teams in that fashion. Then we took all of our office staff who could perform their roles at home, and we set them up very quickly, got everybody out. The people who were needed to be on site in offices left cubicles and occupied office space. We've since started to repatriate those employees back from their homes back into their offices as we spent the time to go through the facility and modify our workstations so that we can have everybody in an area where they can work. Most of our office employees don't wear masks until they actually leave their office. And everybody's done a very nice job of adhering to all of those practices. It did take some time for that to become the new norm, as Ravi mentioned, but internally it is. I have a mask on my desk. I have one in my backpack. I have one hanging on the door in my office so that no matter where I go to refill my cup of coffee, I'm going to respect the policy, and everybody in our organization has gotten to that point. Additionally, we've got a partner of ours who's on site handling heavy maintenance, and they even went to the measure of thermal temperatures for anybody entering their portion of the facility, whether they were employees, customers, vendors, FedEx driver. If you came in, you got your temperature monitored. I also think that there's going to be behavioral change. I think people in the past, if they weren't feeling good, sometimes they just went to work anyway. And I think that's going to be a big behavioral change that we've demanded. If you don't feel good, stay home, because you're risking the livelihoods of all of your colleagues. And we've had very good response from all of our staff. People say, hey, I'm not feeling very good today. They communicate with HR. I'm going to stay home. HR helps monitor them while they're at home. A couple of days later, they come back. We actually bought thermometers for our staff so that they could take their temperatures prior to coming into work. We felt like that was a good mitigating step. Because our facility is so large, we don't really have one portal of entry. Each different department has their own mechanism to get in, so it was more practical. But that's really how we've handled the disorganization.
So behavioral change, I think it's going to be more of a ritual. Now, I was speaking to one of my friends, and she told me that she's kept an oximeter everywhere. One oximeter is on her desk, one in her car, and one at her home. So everywhere she goes, she keeps checking her oxygen levels. Yeah, Andrew, your views.
Hit the right, take the mute button off. For us, yeah, with the aircraft components and the engine piece parts that we deal with, we can't touch them without gloves anyway. So the gloves issue wasn't too much of a problem. We instigated the fact that everybody has to wear a mask. It was also a state requirement. So as probably everybody's familiar with, guess what's on my desk? So we have everybody with masks. Anybody that could work from home, so the office staff, were immediately basically told to go home. We invested in some IT and monitors and printers and things like that, and packaged them up and sent them off on their way. What is interesting is there is a high probability that several staff who are working from home may well not come back. It's not that they're not part of the company anymore, but they have got to that point of saying, you know what, working from home, there are certain advantages to this, and if we can continue to do that, then we're going to. As a owner of a business, there is something to be said that if people like the advantage of working from home, there's no reason why they can't do that moving forward as well. So that's taking a little bit of a silver lining out of this situation to say, yeah, go and do that. For us, with being an MRO in a relatively small confined area, social distancing has been a challenge. Reminding employees that they can't congregate. We had to make adjustments to the break rooms, and basically reduce seating, reducing capacity of areas. That's been something that we've done and gone through. A state requirement, we'd actually already started to do it, was to take temperature of all of our employees when they come in the morning. We have a log of that. We have enhanced cleaning procedures that go in place. We've stopped all non-essential visits to the facility by vendors, by delivery drivers. It's come as a certain shock to certain of our vendors and suppliers. Well, what do you mean? Well, you can leave it on the front step. We have locked entries with video cameras. We know it's there. Thank you very much. We'll text you. Thank you. And we'll pick it up once you've gone. You know, we go through quite a lot of isopropyl alcohol as we clean things down, particularly from vendor operations when parts come back, cleaning the containers before they're touched and handled. Having UPS drivers and FedEx drivers and any of those couriers leaving items outside of shipping receiving. Once they've got back in their truck and driven off, we go outside, we pick up the containers. It's all about reducing those social interactions outside of the team for as much as possible.
Extra work also. Agreed. But it's necessary. That goes without saying. So yeah, let's yeah, Ravi, so you have to add to this.
Yes, I wanted to add, you know, in each of the countries, the environments are different. We are a hugely populated country, and most of the people who come to work come using the public transport, you know, where they're exposed to a number of people. So whatever tests and checks that one does, you know, there is also the asymptomatic, you know, variety, you know, of situations that are there where it does not manifest itself. So, you know, other than, you know, we speak of social distancing because, you know, that is how ideally we would like to see, but I think the greater emphasis is on physical distancing. I think ironically, socially, we've come in much closer, you know, with things like various, you know, media, smartphones and things, but the physical distancing is something that has to be fine-tuned, you know, especially for us in Airworks, because as I said, a large number of people commute on a public transport that is packed. You know, we see people hanging out of trains and buses. While that kind of density has reduced, but the fact remains is our people are very vulnerable. We cannot offer 100% protection or a guarantee, but we can take whatever steps, you know, are recommended to mitigate the possibility of the spread of COVID, you know, especially because a lot of the people are asymptomatic. Another step is, you know, to ensure that the team feel confident enough that should they, God forbid, contract COVID, then we as an organization have made provisions. We have a COVID control center. We have doctors who are available 24/7. They can consult. There are people who come home and do the tests. And every staff member is covered by insurance. Beyond that, I don't think any organization can offer a totally sanitized area, but I think every organization globally recognizes that the primary objective is risk mitigation. That is it.
I think this is going to be a way of our lives for like at least a year to come.
Yes,
at least we find a vaccine.
Let's embrace it. You know, we can't fight it. Let's, you know, go with the flow and see how best we can, you know, it's pointless swimming against the tide.
We've started getting some questions from the audience. So let's take one of the questions who's coming from an anonymous attendee. He's asking, what are the measures that MROs are taking in this difficult time so that aircraft can be available to operators with minimal grounding, like reduction in base maintenance, ground time, etc.?
So I think, you know, we've had a fair amount of time to stand by, take stock of the situation, identify what are the kind of efficiencies that we can build into the systems. We've developed a software. We're trying to go completely paperless, you know, as far as, you know, documentation and other things are concerned. Every employee is equipped with a smartphone or a tablet to ensure that the manuals or whatever information and data is available to them, you know. So these are some of the steps that have to be taken to ensure, you know, that there's an efficiency of service. As I said very early on, the margins are wafer thin in the MRO business. And if one has to survive, then you have to be reinventing the way we do business. And these are some of the steps that we have initiated to ensure that the efficiencies are enhanced and the quality of delivery also is maintained to the best of standards.
Yeah, Patrick, you would like to have your views on this?
Well, from a component level MRO, I really think that what we're trying to do is utilize our synergize our inventory spares through our MRO to create exchange pools, especially on larger assets, whether it be inlet cowls or thrust reversers, flaps. So very challenging assets. So what we're really trying to do is say, how do we get those assets and collaborate with the airlines? The airline doesn't have to carry the inventory on time, and we can take turn time out of the equation for those folks. I think that really is the biggest impact for us, is collaborating with that operator and creating that on-time inventory for them to have at their disposal through our MRO.
In fact, this, I was going to link this with my next question. Like, the only positive thing that I saw out of this entire COVID-19 pandemic is all the digital innovations and solutions that I've been reading over last 6 months. Like, Airbus has recently come up with an e-delivery option of aircraft, or many MROs are coming up with options of remote monitoring solutions or drones, etc., which are provided. So, going ahead, what do you think? These techniques will completely replace the traditional physical inspection, repair, or how is it going to be? What do you think?
I certainly think that the aging aircraft that have this maintenance, that's going to be very challenging to take aged aircraft and put those things into place. So the traditional methodologies are going to have to be refined. Some of those things might be able to be implemented in certain fashions, but I do think it's going to be very challenging to take those aging aircraft that are 10, 12, 15, 20 years old sometimes. Their maintenance programs and what they're on are already pretty touch heavy, and there will be efficiencies gained through some technology, but I don't think it's going to be wholesale. The newer aircraft, that'll be seen. I'm excited to see RFID chipping of components and doing document tracking through the entire aircraft, and engine tracking through the same methodology. Some of those technologies are already being used and approved, and I'll be intrigued to see how the new OEM aircraft can create those, because it does create a wonderful value for the operator to say, I can reduce my downtime, I can reduce some other ancillary risk and costs with those.
Yeah, I found that
There's
very
one thing, like,
go ahead.
yeah, go ahead, Jack.
I'm so sorry. I'm
No,
just used to
continue.
discussion.
I know, that's okay. Please continue.
I apologize. Patrick, I mean, that was a great point. What I've found in the past is a lot of those older models of aircraft and engines, their maintenance programs are built a lot differently, like you said. And so, yeah, trying to implement new solutions, whether digitally or new technology, is a great thing to try to do, but it sometimes is a little trickier just because of how they're written, right? But with the newer ones, coming online, right, it usually ends up being a bit easier because you have a better base to start from, right? That newer digital base, right? And so it'll be interesting to see how that's accelerated, knowing that there's still a lot of older aircraft and engines out there. If there's ways to get around some of that, but definitely there are difficulties trying to take older, I should say, assets and trying to put new technologies on them, because they might not have the foundation laid right for them, whether digitally or technologically, a lot more touch time. So I think that was a great point. Yeah.
I feel many airlines will now try to preserve their liquidity, and many of the airlines have also, they have extended their deliveries. The deliveries that were supposed to come within the next 6 months are now extended beyond 2 years. So I think they will continue with the existing fleet that they have. So the point that you mentioned, currently whatever innovations are there, they're implementing those innovations for older aircraft is going to be difficult. So how are the MRO going to solve this challenge? What do you feel? Yeah, Patrick.
Sorry. Well, I think the ability for APU or engine shops, I do know there's a group that is doing, that offers things like APU monitoring, so APU shop. They do APU monitoring where you send them some data directly from the aircraft, and that can be done from an aging aircraft perspective with the proper connectivity with the airline themselves. And I believe that the engine monitoring can be done similarly. But again, that's a, and that was driven through an operator. Even though it's an MRO, it's related to an operator. So they had the backing and fundamentals for the quality side and regulatory side to be covered by that operator in that proving ground. It will be interesting to see what solutions come up over the next couple of years that can be implemented. Again, those aging aircraft really are a challenge in the way that those programs are developed originally and approved by the FAA or EASA.
Andrew, have you been using any of these latest innovations like remote model monitoring and stuff?
No, it's not hit us on the individual piece parts of components or piece parts of engines. We know it will be coming. You hear the OEMs talking about the digital twin, particularly from GE and Rolls-Royce. And I think Patrick probably has more to say this than I do. But when you're getting into materials trading, the selling of assets and the paperwork and the trace issues that get involved, back to birth requirements, the sooner we can get a standard and a technological solution to that, the better. Because when you're trying, for example, for us to buy a part for rotable inventory, when you're trying your level best to go through the paperwork packages all the way back to birth, it's very, very time consuming. And that to me is one of those glaring things for technology. And that doesn't require new engines. That can be applied across the board, but we need a platform, I believe, that can significantly streamline that process.
You know, I've had several conversations with some technology groups who were discussing the ability to put blockchain in place for just what Andrew was discussing. And I think that's a potential solution. And if you think about it from the engine side, especially with internal components, being able to go blockchain all the way back to the manufacturing alloys and where those pieces are fabricated, and what that would provide in terms of document trails that aren't, or sort of, they can't be changed, right? Blockchain can't be changed. It's there. It exists all the way through. And if you did create a circumstance where you could implement blockchain in both the aftermarket, because Andrew's correct, it's very challenging. I'm pulling parts off of aircraft. I pull 2,000 or 3,000 parts off of a 777, and I sell 500 of them in the first 2 years to maybe 500 different airplanes. So how do we track all of those and know where that landed? And then he knows where that came from all the way back to the original, as well as the documentation for the last time I sent it to Andrew's shop for repair. What was the repair? How does that get captured in blockchain? Very complicated. It'll be hard to be complicit across the entire marketplace with that. But I do think that there's a very large value add, especially in the engine side. There's a very large value add to tracking those things and putting that into development as an industry.
I can.
Yeah.
So Patrick, it's very good. You touched on some of those points that I've been investigating with some folks recently. Looking at the traceability of parts. Now, we do know of one of the MRO blockchain alliances as announced earlier this year. Now, where that's at, it's hard to say with COVID, but it definitely provides a viable path using blockchain, not only because of the part traceability, but we have to remember, right, that we're talking about full assets, right? The whole aircraft and the whole engine, and that'll be valuable not only to MROs or to looking at piece parts, but it's going to be very valuable, I think, to full assets that lessors and buyers and sellers can use, because it'll allow them to see a systematic level view of your assets and looking at it all the way down. That can then later feed into things such as prices and stuff. So you can then kind of see that ecosystem, right, where you really see this whole asset and look at all the things that are inside that with that blockchain type of immutability and traceability. And so you can make much more objective decisions based on what you do with it, selling it, et cetera, and the value of it. It's kind of where I see it really going. I think it's a big area to really look at in the future. So
I certainly think that will also put things like suspected unapproved parts, and that really puts the industry in a much better position. Incident related, non-incident related parts. That gives you such a comfort level when you know that those things are already taken care of with a click of a button, based on a system that functions that way. And there will be operators who decide that the value is not there for them because maybe their aircraft aren't tracked that way. So when the aftermarket airplanes hit, so at least return aircraft goes back to the lessor, they can double check everything installed on the aircraft. They have the blockchain, they see it's all there. And then when they go to package that aircraft, the everything from the ADs and SB statuses, landing gear, the hard times, all of those things tracked are in a single, sort of final chain that can then be turned over to the next asset owner or to disposition to whomever has the asset.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed the last point. I think I got disconnected at some point. Yeah. Moving ahead from blockchain, I think we'll take some audience questions because they are like, I have a load of audience questions coming in now. One question is for Ravi sir. If you can see, the question is from Commodore Panda. He's asking, is there any provision for liquidity from our government like in US as mentioned by Andrew?
Well, okay, yeah, thank you for that question. There is no liquidity provision. The ministry has been very proactive in, hearing out the challenges of the MRO industry. And quite honestly, what we are seeking is not funding from the government, but we are seeking various other benefits in terms of the ability to discount the bills with banks and financial institutions. Are you there, Swati? I think we've lost you again. Okay. You're muted.
I just switched off my video to check if the internet connection is stable.
Okay, you're there, but you can hear us. Okay, so we've asked, the government to intervene with the banks and other financial institutions to kind of permit the bill discounting so that adds to some of the liquidity that MROs in the country can have. The other thing is, the airports and other agencies with which the MRO has to interact, we've asked for a kind of a deferred payment, scheme. We're not saying that you, give us a reduced rate or things like that. We're just saying, allow, a deferred payment and we will, come back and clear all the dues as and when the industry picks up. So the ministry has taken a positive view of this. Things take time to change for us to even accept the change that is happening. So we expect that we may not be granted 100% whatever has been asked for, but we will hope for things like bill discounting and other facilities. There's no cash funding from the government. They have other priorities, which we fully respect and recognize.
All right, I'm so sorry for this fluctuation in the internet because of the weather maybe. So we move to the last part of the webinar now. My final question, and I want to take on this question from all of you. How do you think the MRO market will recover in coming years, like the remainder of 2020 and 2021? Let's start with Andrew.
You caught me multitasking there, sorry.
Should I repeat my question?
Yes, if you could. You were breaking up. Let me explain it that way.
Oh, I am sorry. I want your take on how the MRO market recovery is going to be in the remainder of 2020 and 2021.
the way we're looking at it, I would expect 2020 to probably end the year with a run rate about anywhere between 25 to 40% below where it was last year. And I would expect, fingers crossed, that we're about 10 to 15% behind 2019 levels by 2021. And I would say, give or take a factor of 50%, I should be right.
Okay, that's very nicely put. What do you say, Patrick?
Well, I want to speak on it in a little bit in generalities as opposed to specifics. I think that the change in the MRO marketplace in the second half of this year and into next year, it's going to be some lumpy business, certainly for the heavy maintenance and folks. But I think there are going to be a lot of opportunities for those people who can adapt to the lease return aircraft, disassemblies, engines being removed and run and moved to other aircraft to create premium assets so that the leasing companies can get those back into work and back into service. I think there's going to be a lot of that work. And aircraft sitting on the ground, especially the domestic aircraft, you know, the A320s and 737s, all these aircraft sitting on the ground for extended periods, isn't good for them. And their counters on their C checks are still clicking along. So as those aircraft lose their valuable green time and sit on the ground, I do think there's going to be opportunities for some targeted MROs. We also saw instantaneously with the COVID shutdown, we saw the halting of all sort of ancillary MRO services, Wi-Fi modifications and in-flight entertainment modifications, very expensive programs where there were fleet-wide mod programs going on. There was a halt to those simply because it was a luxury for the airline, not necessarily a necessity. That sector is going to have to find a new way to create revenue. I think that may go even further. That may be a 2022, 2023 recovery. But I do think that the MRO sector for return to service on airplanes and C checks is going to be targeted. It's going to create a targeted market that's going to have to just behave differently. It will recover. By second half of next year, I certainly see that the heavy maintenance side will recover because all that green time that is going to need to be reestablished on these aircraft.
Second half of next year, that seems pretty early. Let's see, let's hope. Fingers crossed. Yeah, Ravi, sir, your take on this.
Well, let me, in very simple terms, I expect that our top line will be halved. And that is exactly what it is. You know, having said that, we continue to invest in developing infrastructure and enhancing capabilities. So we expect by December 2020, our 2 hangars in Cochin will be readied for operation. At the same time, you know, we're extending, you know, our services to the defense also. So we've done, you know, work for the defense, and we expect, you know, to focus, you know, equal attention over there to try and develop it. Fortunately, the government of India, through the Ministry of Civil Aviation, is encouraging the convergence between the defense and the civil MROs. So one is hopeful, you know, that all the eggs are not in the civil aviation basket, but we're going to be able to mitigate it to some extent through defense work. But directly your question, top line 50% down.
Okay, Chuck, your views.
Sure. You know, similar views to a lot. You know, it's going to take a big hit going into 2020 here, trying to finish it out. You know, a third of business reduction, plus or minus, at like the 50%, right? You know, and it's really going to be hard to say where exactly it ends up. But as the narrow bodies are starting to slowly come back, you know, we definitely see business picking up in that space, right? Using a lot of the green time and the time that's still left on a lot of existing assets for sure. So it's not like it's going to be a big major pounce back, but hopefully as we go into 2021, we'll start seeing a lot of those bigger checks, as Patrick talked about, the heavy checks, and start seeing more shop visits and all the type of shops, and even some of the wide bodies, hopefully, that are not, the freighters are still flying, right? So I know there's going to be some of that here and there, but hopefully get that steady stream of wide bodies slowly coming back as consumers gain confidence over the next couple of years, and hopefully 2021 we'll start seeing some of that. So, yeah.
Hope we see the white bodies very soon now. So, listening to this conversation, I will summarize it in just one sentence: plan for the worst and hope for the best. On this note, I would like to bid adieu to all of you, thanking all my speakers for a wonderful discussion and all the participants for being a lovely interactive audience. We'll be back very soon with the next topic. Please do give me a feedback on this webinar and also some suggestions on what topics you would like to cover for the next upcoming sessions. Also, I would like to apologize for the bad net connection. There's a thunderstorm coming in, so this was expected. Anyways, thank you.
Well, thank you, Swati, and to my fellow panelists. Thank you. What a privilege and a pleasure to meet with you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you very much. Very informative.
Thanks.